name's Annabel Gerry. I'm the part-time and flexible working champion in PD, and I've got experience of this both as somebody who's requested part-time working and had part-time patterns and worked flexibly, and I still do actually work flexibly, and also somebody who manages lots of flexible workers. So I'd like to just share some of my experiences of that, and hope it might be useful to some people. So what's my experience? The first time I asked to work flexibly was just after I had my kids. I was working in DFID Tanzania and I'd had twins, and I asked to work flexibly then. I was actually denied that request at the time because of the work that I was required to do, but I had a very supportive line manager who suggested instead that I change my hours, and I worked core hours there from 10 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, avoiding all the worst of the traffic, and got a lot of support to manage external partners who, like the World Bank, for example, who like to do video conferences in the evening. So I didn't get what I wanted, but what I actually did get worked really well in the end, and I felt supported. The next time I needed to work part-time was a bit more dramatic. I was in DFID Nigeria, and my youngest child, who was then just 5, got very seriously ill, and we had to be evacuated to Southern Africa. And that was an absolutely brilliant experience of DFID at its best. I went to a 2.5-day approximately working pattern, done whenever I could do it, and DFID Nigeria gave me work to do that wasn't time critical but was really important to get done. And it was absolutely brilliant. It was a lifesaver. It kept me sane, and it really helped us as a family to get through a difficult time. That was something that felt a bit more normal. And then I had a phased return when I came back to the UK after that experience, to Abercrombie House, where I've been for the last 3.5 years. I started back part-time, but soon found that the cost of living and everything else back in the UK, that wasn't going to be feasible, and went on a phased return up to full-time, and again was supported by a different set of managers to do that. I'm now head of a department with 47 staff, and actually 60% of them work flexibly. And what's really interesting is to look at the differences within that. We've got 18 people with flexible pattern, 5 of them work compressed hours, and 10 of those 18 are men. So this is definitely not just something for women. And I've got 10 part-timers who also work flexibly. 4 of them work flexibly, and there's loads of different reasons. Some of them are caring for kids, that's the majority. We've got 5 men and 9 women doing that. Some of them are caring for elderly relatives. We've got 3 women doing that. A couple are doing it just because they like it, which is a good enough reason for me. Some of them are studying. We've got 1 managing a long commute, and another one who simply wants to spend more time in the same location as his partner. So lots and lots of different reasons. And I have to confess, I was worried when I took over the department like that. I wondered, how would it work? But actually it works. We've set a culture where everyone's doing it, everyone covers for everyone else. It's not to say it's perfect in all respects, and I'll talk about some of the challenges in a minute, but it does work. What have I learnt? I think the main thing is line manager support is really, really important. So getting your line manager to understand why you're doing this and to support you. And I remember in the Tanzania example where I couldn't go part-time, but my line manager realised I was really busy. She really helped me to prioritise, and in 1 or 2 areas told me just to wing it, which felt slightly uncomfortable advice at the time, but it was the right thing to do, and it gave me that perspective. Flexibility requires flexibility. That's maybe an obvious point, but I think it's really important that people who work flexibly know when to change their arrangements for the benefit of colleagues. And good judgment and being open to other staffs and other colleagues' reasonable needs is really important. Being prepared to rejig workloads is really, really important too. For example, when I was working in South Africa, I had to be clear about what sort of work I could do that would help the office, and what sort of work actually I really couldn't do because it would have stressed people out, because I couldn't, in my situation, which was unusual because of hospital treatment, but I couldn't guarantee to deliver to a specific date. So I had to change and be flexible about my workload. So being realistic about that's really important too. And I've got one member of staff at the moment who's moved to work remotely nearly all the time, and she was Deputy Head of Department, she's dropped that off, but the advantage is with moving to a remote space, she's now doing much more policy and getting in depth, so for her career it's just a different track and a different emphasis. I think the last real learning point for me is that work-life balance is not really about, well, not at all about excluding one from the other. For me, it's meant that work comes home and home comes to work. And balance for me means bringing one into the other. And that's about really being me fully in both places. So to give you some examples of what I mean by this, it's stuff like my kids making fairy cakes and biscuits for the recent PD Heads Away Day and bringing those in. Having a photo calendar. We don't work hot desking here, so I can have a photo calendar on my desk. That's a nice thing that I do. Not being afraid to talk about personal things if they're going to impact on my work. So for me, during the last couple of years, it's often been I've been perhaps worried about a follow-up test related to my daughter's medical treatment. She had leukemia, so it was a worrying time, and I was able to communicate to staff that I was concerned about things when I was concerned, and that helped me and it helped them as well. Other staff taking time when I need to for school appointments as well, as the regular stuff as well as the sort of more dramatic things like hospital. Welcoming peers and colleagues to home, for me that's been really important. And Nick Dyer is in my house known as the person who's actually quite good at catching tennis balls. So there you are, he was dragooned into playing catch by my then 7-year-old. So that's how they think of him, which is nice. And the other thing I think as a head of department or in a more senior position, it means also being prepared to deal with stuff when it needs to be dealt with. And it's not always ideal. There was one famous occasion where one of the same daughter was having a blood transfusion. I was in hospital and we were doing a restructuring and I had to take a difficult call about that restructuring, but if I hadn't taken it, the consequences would have been quite stressful for my team. So I just did it and that was fine. So that's some of the things I've learned. Some of the challenges, there's a few things really. I think the biggest one is give and take. So it's really about ensuring those who don't work flexibly and who are in the office full time don't end up compensating for colleagues who've got more flexible patterns. And that's something that we work on all the time, so that there is that genuine give and take and people who are in all the time working a quote-unquote normal pattern don't suffer. Fridays can be a difficulty, and so sometimes we do need to ask people to be a bit more flexible about their arrangements on Friday, because otherwise those that are always in on a Friday would always end up picking up, and that really wouldn't be fair on them. So if we want to have a culture where everyone supports flexibility, there's that give and take. I think another thing I struggle with a bit is being confident that those who are working, particularly part-time, have a fair job load, and it's really important to ensure that they also have a fair performance assessment. And those are things I hope we're getting right, but it's quite difficult and it's got something to focus on. Cover arrangements is another one. One of my teams particularly, they're all got very, very flexible patterns and they work for one another, and what they do is brilliant forward planning, and they have a calendar and they let me know who's around at particular times. So doing those extra things, but that means I know what's going on, it works for me and it works for them as a team, they know what's going to. I hope what my story does is to encourage you to think about it, whether you're thinking about asking for flexible patterns or going part-time for the first time, or whether you're a manager and somebody's bringing that request to you, just to really encourage you. I know in my own case it has totally helped me to stay and stick with my career in DFID, which I wouldn't have been able to do through my daughter's illness if I hadn't had that offered to me. And I also know that for a lot of the people that work in the department I'm currently heading as well, it's really helped them to stay with us and stay committed to work that otherwise wouldn't have been possible.